Okay. So that should screen capture. Actually, I want this part up. So in the files here, I don't know if you can see that. Let me make that a little bigger. Not big enough. I put a community assist scope. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it up, and what we'll do is we'll kind of brainstorm what the requirements would be. And that hopefully will give you a heads up as to what to do when you do your assignment. So the other thing I'm going to do before I pull it up is I think I'm just going to pull up Word or WordPad. Let's try Word. And I'll record what we come up with on that, and I'll post that on the blog. Hopefully Word will not tell me that it's not registered. Hopefully it won't take forever to open. Yeah. It's so I'll show you.
Is there a link in the syllabus?
Yes, at the top of the syllabus. I don't want to install updates necessarily. Oh, don't take several minutes. All right. It's odd. Sometimes, after 30 years of playing with computers, I begin to hate them.
All hardware sucks. All software sucks.
All right. So let me pull up the PDF. I do just, it's interesting. You know what takes the longest to load in Canvas is a text file. And I do not understand that at all. PDFs, Word docs, they all load instantly, but a text file, you get that little bear with the wheels, yeah. All right, so this is basically kind of what I gave you. It has a little bit more. It's kind of like a history and then a scope, and then we can use this to come up with some general ideas of what requirements are. Now, some of the requirements and some of the business rules are in the document, and that's true of what I gave you also. I mean, so you don't have to come up with things that are entirely out of the document. A lot of them you can pull from the document. So Community Assist, some of you have seen this before because I have a database, which I'm very sick of, that I've used for a lot of classes called Community Assist. But it's a charity organization that offers one-time loans to community members who find themselves in temporary need. And these loans are grouped around predefined services such as food, rent, medical, education, etc. They are one-time, and there are one-time and lifetime limits on the amounts of each of these services. And the goal of the organization is not only to help a client through a hard time, but to help each client find other more sustainable means. So it'd be a nice charity if it really existed. It's funded through the generosity of donors. Donors can contribute directly to the organization. So I say each loan is reviewed to ensure its authenticity. Donors are not applied to a specific service. So when they just donate to the general organization, it's not to one particular thing. It's run by a small number of employees. I'm not reading everything here, but and all the activities are recorded in a database. And here, this is actually getting ahead of it. Let's just leave, because this I actually used for a class where we were building the front end, right? But we wanted to record all the activities in the database, which would mean like donations, etc. I'm just looking to see what else we can do. I picked this morning because I remembered it had a fairly nice scope, but I don't want to necessarily leap ahead to the diagram that's getting ahead of it. Let's just go, given what we have on this, what would be some of the requirements? Think about the data. What kind of data does it have to store? Let's just come up with brainstorm, just field. So it's a community charity, it has donors, it has clients. There are certain categories of loans that they give out.
Well, it would have to store the name of the community members.
Right.
It would also have to store the amount of money that's going to be loaned out.
So, and particularly, one of the things that's not real clear in this, but I think the request amounts, what they're asking for, because they don't always get the complete amount they ask for.
Okay.
Types of services?
Types of services.
And what is the limit? It's a one-time.
So there are limits, yeah. So we would need that, right? We need the one-time limit
Yes.
and the lifetime
And
limits.
the lifetime. Correct.
Donors?
We would want to know the donors. What do we want to know about the donors? Yeah, their name. What other information?
How much?
You might want the
How
that
much they're donating.
right. Let's just do this. How much? I didn't hear.
Their addresses, like their.
Yeah, I think you need their addresses. If people
There
donate
are-
to you, you have tax obligations to them.
Right, you do. Also, you have anonymous donors. Sometimes people don't want to be identified.
Can you do that tax-wise? You can.
You can.
Clean it.
You just, yeah,
You can get your money.
you get.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, you need a. tax
So one of the
license.
things as a business rule would be, do you allow anonymous donors?
Yes.
Looks like we need some date, a date field.
We do need some date fields, yeah, business. I'm just gonna do this as a question. Do we allow anonymous donors? Typically, people take money where they can get it, but
Yeah.
You need a database for grants applied for and grants received.
yeah, so we
Or a
need,
table, not a database.
yeah, grants applied for, and we also want to know what people actually received, right?
I meant grants that the charity is applying for,
Oh,
because they will be applying for grants as well as getting private donations.
in my database, I didn't have that, but that would be more real life, yeah.
Also, a letter of approval and a letter of denial.
Although I don't know if you need the letters, although you could have it. You probably do want, and then we need to get the dates in there too, but you probably do want to know
The reason.
grant
for this-
approved or not,
Yes.
and reason,
Yeah.
Reviewer.
the reviewer
Yeah.
for the grants, which actually brings up another thing where you could do the
Employee.
reviewer, employees. Now, one of the things you can do with these is you could add a constraint. Will not be a human resources database. So you would probably have the information about the employees, but not their complete payroll and all that
The
information.
amount of the request, but you also need the date of the request.
Right.
Because they're a monthly and a lifetime limit. You know, if you need a lifetime total.
Right. Although, here's the thing, actually in a database, and there's no reason for you to know this, you generally don't store calculated,
Okay.
because you can calculate it on the fly at any time.
Also, you would need,
Date of request, date of review, probably,
for the,
The date of.
the
date of donation. What?
donations and the processing.
What would say again? I didn't.
Uh,
Typing, I lose things.
The donations, you need somebody to log in the donations that are being received.
Yeah, I was thinking they would come in online, but I guess you could somebody would have to enter
Yeah.
them.
Mm.
The date of dispersal of if they requested something, the date that was reviewed and then the date that was dispersed.
You probably would want for the request, the date of the dispersal. Yeah, that's actually good. I might redo this database to involve some of these. Because it would be more real that way.
Would you need something that would keep track of the, where a request is in its process?
You might want to, so let's put that, and I,
Status.
yeah, request status.
So it's held up at a certain stage of being approved or denied,
Yeah.
that can be accessed.
What other things? So when we do the addresses of donors and their names, we probably, other things, I mean, if you were to break this down, you would also probably want street, city, state, zip, etc. You know, so the address, when you actually think of the fields, I mean, you could, it kind of implies that, but you could,
Do you want an email address? Mark?
you probably do want an email for them.
So do you wanna make this address of donors list the same as your address of your donors list for contacting? Like when you're trying to solicit new?
You could use the same one for contacting.
I was thinking it might be a security issue because you don't necessarily want the person who's contacting the donors to have access to the rest of it.
Well, there are ways.
Just to put down in the constraints.
Yeah, I mean, some of that could be a security concern.
Yeah.
Well, if you have email addresses, you need email addresses of the donors and the email addresses of the clients.
Right, now what if they, so with the clients, the thing is we have the addresses of the donors and all that. We will also need the addresses of the clients and their emails.
And if we
If
don't
they have
email,
emails.
we should allow that field to be blank.
Yes, so that's actually something to think about too.
Yeah.
When we get down to it, which ones are we going to require and which are we not?
Did we already say anything about following up with the clients? Because it says more sustainable means of meeting their needs.
Yeah, so one of the things we might be is for the database, what follow-ups or some record of meetings and things. Now, typically you would do this, you might actually start off by brainstorming, but then you'd have to talk to the people that are actually going to be doing it to see what kinds of things they need to store and what kinds of things they want.
Also, if you're gonna allow the emails of the clients to be left blank, you would, if they're homeless, you're gonna have to be able to leave the address and everything. blank.
Right.
And you know, maybe just have your homeless.
And also with the address, you just saying city, street, city, state, a lot of people use PO boxes as well.
Well, you could add PO box. And also one of the things to know is particularly on the donor side, there could be multiple addresses.
Yes.
So, and so one of the things, I guess we could put this, and the addresses, I mean, some of these decisions you can make when you're designing. Right now, we're just sort of trying to get it, but things with the address too, if they were homeless. I don't know, I hadn't thought about that, but
We need the paid and the volunteer. You say some are paid and some are.
some are volunteer, which would be in the employee thing.
And then it says, the amount going to charity should always be at least 75% of donations. So we need some kind of field that captures, I guess.
That's again a thing you can calculate.
Calculate.
Yeah,
I know a lot of times if people receive it, they have a payee. You know, what's a disbursement person or to a payee, you have like a
oh, like,
direct dispersal or not,
Mhm.
direct dispersal or payee.
okay, so let's look, I had a thing on,
Maybe that's like a type, like a,
Yeah, if you have one or two, either direct
Yeah.
to the person or to a payee.
Mhm.
And then if you have to pay the name.
this is much more complicated than the database that I actually created, but that's good. All right, so, I mean, there's probably more that we could come up with, but you get the idea of coming up. And when you think about it, okay, right at this point, I would not worry about how you group it. That's actually the next step, is once you've got a really good list of things that you need to figure out how do these things group together. And again, you want to do it with a minimum of repetition, which we'll talk about. But for right now, it's just good to get a list. We have business rules. So some of the business rules are in there, right? This is a question. Do we allow anonymous donors? I don't know. That's not one I thought about. Will not be human resources. I don't know what that was.
Oh, I think that was employee information. We decided.
Right,
we were
right.
gonna Keep that.
So, because I wasn't going to do like the complete, even in a business, typically there's a human resources database will be kept separate from the business database. Though they might link, so that you get like the basic employee information because you want to know which employee is doing what. Yeah.
As part of the business role, where the money comes from the another consideration for business use.
Maybe, I'm not sure. Explain a little more.
Like, if it were a public corporation or private one,
Oh.
it's like a group that they would otherwise not want to associate with.
Oh,
Like,
I hadn't thought about that, but I guess if it was so would do they have rules about who they'll accept employees' donations from? You could make some rules. I'm just going to do it as a general.
Yeah, because a lot of nonprofits can accept money from campaign donations.
Right. And I suppose if there was like a drug cartel in the neighborhood, you might not want to take that. So some of the rules are like that every grant, I'm just going to arbitrarily develop a rule here. Every grant must be reviewed by 2 employees, by at least 2 employees. Right, so that's a kind of business rule. So in the database, what you have to do is you have to have something that shows that it's a way to check that. Who reviewed it, when. You could also, this is a fairly typical rule for basically for productivity kinds of reasons. Every grant must be reviewed within how many days or how soon after being posted?
7 days.
Within 7 days after being posted. Yes. Is that at least some? I could probably put some spaces under here. Is that better? I know it's really hard to see. One of the things that big TV back there was supposed to be in was to be able to project front and back, but they've never managed to make it work. And then one of these days, I would love to be able to project. I think it is possible. You'd have to really work at it. Everything on the same screen, so you could have it like a side thing, and then do
Yeah, can't you do that from the,
maybe from the Google thing, but I'm not sure how to do it.
from the, sorry, I'm totally.
I was thinking Google Hangouts is what I've been using. It might be possible that you'd all have to join the Hangout.
Oh, it was another class that had a video sharing thing that you could be on while you were.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how to. No, that might come
Is it
through.
like collaborative?
It
Yes,
might be
that.
Collaborate. I could try Collaborate. I've had a lot of people say they don't like Collaborate.
Oh, it worked really well.
It works
We
well
talked
for
to Bill
us.
about it.
Yeah, I know. I've talked to some. I know that Collaborate is a huge hole. It's a Flash application.
Yeah.
So anyway, I might though, because it would be. It's really hard to look up here and type and do things sometimes. What other kinds of business rules do you think would be? This is fairly typical. Again, this doesn't really affect anything in the database, but you probably would eventually want a query that would check to see how long was it for each application to be reviewed. lot of companies will put little metrics like this on things, some of them fairly ridiculous. I know I think the help desk here says that they will review everything within 2 hours. If they're doing most of it.
Yeah, I was a straight A.
Yeah.
I mean, every grant must be reviewed by at least,
Oh, two
Two
employees.
employees?
Yeah.
I would also want them to initial or sign their name somewhere so I know which employee.
Yeah, I think in the database there would be a link to which employee did the review.
Yes.
Would it, I know usually you can do the calculations outside, but would a business rule be that someone needs to verify that at least 75% is going?
Yeah, so we've got business rules. One of the things that we did is reporting. We did all these fields. We didn't really talk about the reporting requirements. Some of them would be things that we need to report on. So you have to have the numbers in there to be able to create the reports. You don't have to have them pre-aggregated. You can do a lot of calculations on the fly. And in fact, it's usually considered better to do them on the fly because they're live numbers. Whereas if you store them in the database, then it's a historic number as opposed to which sometimes is worth doing if you need those history numbers, right? So report on percentages spent, or percentages for charity versus versus admin. I cannot spell when I'm talking. I'm not a good speller anyway. Yeah, that's worse. And I have a D on admin. All right. There's other things like things that you would probably want. You'd want totals spent on each type, right? I was thinking of, so they give out things for food and education. So for each type of service, maybe. And you'd probably want totals by month, right?
And year.
And year. And probably, I mean, if we go through this, you'd probably want totals by month and by year for type. You probably would want, you might have want to see which types have, which employees have done which things. I mean, you'd want reports on that kind of thing. There's a lot of reports that you'd want, and it would probably be worthwhile making up a big list. I'm not sure I want to right now, but it would.
Because you want to see which, the most out of the food, medical, and education, where's the most need.
Right. So somewhat you could do that with total spent on each type of service, because you can see, and you could do total requests for each type. Right, because total spent actually would not necessarily, it's actually comparing apples to oranges. I mean, the amount that you would give somebody that needs some different than the amount you give somebody that can't pay their rent, possibly, so, and if they have a medical expense, it might be a higher amount. So you're not necessarily carrying similar expenses. So the number of requests might actually be a more valid thing as to where the need is. Does this make sense anyway as a process? So as I said, I'll post this with a little bit of comment on the blog, but let's look at the actual assignment, and then I'll show you how to do the groups, and we can get started. We've only got like a half hour, so if you want to wait till Monday, you can do that too. But so under the assignments, if we go into, this would be under the SQL Server. So actually, how do you guys have it organized? Let's go to modules. Are your modules organized anything like mine?
Seems so.
Okay.
Yes, they are.
So we'll look at Vincent's vinyl thing here. That's the PDF, kind of like what I was showing you, that has some descriptions of that. These are PowerPoints, which I may or may not do, but we'll cover the information there. This is the requirements presentation, so this is actually the first assignment. And I'm not going to ask you to present today, but and the presentations, by the way, are not very formal. I'm not going to grade you on your presentation ability. I just want to be able to show the class what you came up with so we can have a discussion about it. Does that make sense? I'm not asking for formal, elaborate presentations unless you just really are bored and want to make one. So I'm going to open up Vince's vinyl PDF here. So this is what the first database is going to be about. And the very first thing we're going to do is come up with requirements for it. Some of them are built into here, and some of them you can brainstorm. And that's part of why we'll have a presentation so we can compare our brainstorms. When we do the groups too, I'm only thinking of 3 or 4 people per group. And you are not, so it'd be good if you stick to the group at least through the first module, and then you can shift groups for the next one, or you can stay the same, whatever. So this is Vince's Vinyl. It's a small shop that sells used vinyl records, and the owners kept track of his sales and purchased in a spiral notebook. He priced things based on what he thought they were worth, often though with only a vague memory of what he paid for them. He is generous with discounts and sometimes over-generous with purchases. His friends worry that he will not be able to continue to support his business in this manner and have convinced him to commission a database for better tracking. So what this database needs to do is it needs to manage all the store's business. There should be an apostrophe there. As it relates to purchasing, storing, and selling vinyl records. It should manage all of the purchases of the albums, including who he bought them from. So no anonymous purchases, I guess. And how much he paid for it. And it should contain an inventory of all the albums in the store. The database should also handle all the point of sale information. And in addition, there's requests. Customers can request things that are not in at the moment. And then you should keep a list of such requests and contact information for customers who have those requests. And by doing that and also getting to keep a list of customers who are willing to give their name, so it's not a requirement. And so you can basically spam them with emails about new purchases and things. They have 2 or 3 part-time employees who handle the shop while he's away. They're allowed to sell albums, but must defer any purchases until Vince is in. The database should track which employees at the counter for each sale, but it will not be a human resources database. That is, it won't contain information about their hours, salaries, etc. There are some business rules that I gave you already, but you can probably think of those. When you're doing used albums, and for sake of simplicity, I would just do used albums here. If you mix used and new, you've got a much more complicated inventory right off the bat. You have to use 2 different methods of handling them, so I would just ignore the new albums. Basically, with the used album, the problem is you have to treat each album individually. Right, so if you might have 10 copies of, I'm going to date myself, but let's say the Beatles' Let It Be. But they're all in different conditions. You know, one might be in mint and worth a fortune. Others might be scratched or warped and not worth much at all. You know, each album has its own individual condition, and so they would be treated individually. They're rated by the quality of the vinyl and the quality of the cover. And I gave the general ratings are like mint, excellent, good, fair, and poor. And the base price for an album is 150% of the price that Vince paid for it, which is actually sounds like a lot, but it's actually a pretty low market.
So that's in addition to what he paid.
In addition to what he paid. Well, actually, so I was thinking 150%. So what he paid for it plus. Yeah, which is a low marker.
It is.
Yeah, if you want to change that, that's fine.
I was just asking because you have it at 250 when you keep it total.
Oh, so I may have miscalculated. So I did $5, $12.50. So 5 and 5. That would be about right.
$7.50.
Oh, so I was doing it. I was doing 100 and. I was doing 150% above the base price, which makes more sense. It's still low. You'd be surprised what companies, how much they go over 400 or 500% sometimes. Not that this matters, but where restaurants make their money are on drinks. Costs them nothing and they charge you a fortune.
Yeah.
$9 margin.
Yeah. So customers who buy 10 albums in a year get 25%. So these are some business rules. You're welcome to come up with some more. I know I asked for business rules, so you've already got several. So we're not going to do the front end, but these are the tasks. Define the stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders in this? There aren't a lot with this one. This is one reason why we're starting with this, is it's fairly simple as things go. And you could very quickly make it more complicated, but let's keep it fairly simple for the beginning. So, you know, one of the things they say, write a brief narrative for a stakeholder describing how they would use it. So we didn't do that in class today, but does that make sense? That's part of like the agile of creating, where you think about each user and you write a brief story about how they would use it. In more object-oriented things, it's called a use case. You know, how would they use it? And I'm not talking about writing an elaborate story. I'm talking about a paragraph.
Would you want it to be like, as a cashier, I need, or I do.
Sure. So you basically, you'd have how would Vince use it, how would a
Right.
customer, yeah.
Okay.
And again, you don't have to write a novel. Unless you really want to write a novel, then you can. But it doesn't have to be that long. It's just how are they going to use it, right? This is really important when you do software, and also it's true with databases. How is it going to be used? It has implications for ultimately when you do the security. If somebody needs to do these things, you may need to make sure they have permissions to do those things. Generally, as a database administrator, and you would say then after that, but no other permissions. They can do what they need to do, but nothing else. Right? The security requirements, we didn't talk about a lot about that. Just real quickly on the community assist thing, what would be some of the security requirements? Let me go back to the Word doc. Let's just think security real quick. What are the things that would be security issues here? Personal information. So the issue here is who should be able to see it? You know, and also how do you protect it? So there's a couple of things with the donors. If you're taking credit cards, one of the things that I would suggest if you're ever in a place where you are building a database to take credit card information is don't hire somebody to handle the credit card information.
I mean, like a third party.
Like a third party, go to in minimum case PayPal or something. And the reason I would say that is that if you do it wrong, you have huge problems and liabilities. What?
Patreon had a huge screw up with it last year.
Yeah, I mean, the big companies mess it up. And if they mess it up, imagine what you can do.
Yeah, look at Wells Fargo.
Well, Wells Fargo is different in a way. That's just pure fraud.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
But Yahoo lost most of their password information recently. They said it was all encrypted.
Yeah.
So the question is, have they managed to decrypt it? So if they haven't decrypted it, they may not have that much information, just a huge file. But so this is, you know, basically at this point, I would say, like when you're doing it, so are you going to, if you let people come in online, like say a donor, right? They enter their own information. Typically, you need to allow them to edit their own information too. Right, so a donor should be able to see their own information. They should be able to edit their own information, but they definitely shouldn't be able to see any other donor's information, and they shouldn't be able to see any client information, right? or employee, well, maybe, some, the employees might advertise their names, but probably not much.
They can see like their own donation history.
You should be able to see your own donation history, yeah. So those are kinds of security things. Typically, although something like this could be attacked, typically attacks are not the biggest security threat. Usually it's somebody internal, like a Snowden, you know, somebody that has a thumb drive and has a password. They tend to be more of a danger than outside forces, but it still can be. You know, you have to protect things. If you do have the credit card information, they should be encrypted, right? But even that's not a guarantee. As I said, I would just let somebody else handle the credit card information.
I mean, that might be off topic, but aren't the credit card information for retail isn't that longer PCI compliance? There's like certain rules.
There are rules, and that's actually something you need to think about when you do some of these are laws involving that. And there are laws in terms of disclosure. Well, actually, you can pretty well sell anybody's information, but except for the credit card information, probably. So one of the things, so we got personal information. Any other security concerns? Financial information, probably.
Probably want to limit employee access.
Yeah, so employees, depending on the employee, you'd have to look at what the employees are doing. They need to be able to see, they don't necessarily need to be able to see all the donor information. Some of them do, right? Because they have to do the taxes and stuff. They probably need to see all the client information. They probably should they be able to edit? These are things that you have to think, client information.
So you just develop employee privileges.
Yeah. When we talk about security more, at a certain point, we'll talk about how you actually implement this. So you can create roles. You could create a role for the employee, or you could have different roles at different levels of
I work at
employees.
a store and I'm considered a manager, so I can access certain things that like a soap sheet.
Right, right. So you probably in the database are a manager. There's a role for managers that has certain privileges that a lower level employee does not have. And you can set that up. Roles can be fairly specific. Client, you can create a role for a client, right? So a client can go in and they can add their own information, the requests. They can edit that information. There's other things we can do too, which we'll talk about later. You can create views. So when you're in a certain role, you can only see you can't actually see the database tables. You can only see views that were prearranged for you. You know, there are things like that. So there are security issues with the employee access. There's also, you know, there's going to be, if you do have eventually a public access to the database, there will be, what are the public roles? What can they see? Right, so they should be able to see all the services that you offer. They should be able to see maybe even totals of donations, not the donors, but the totals of it.
Yeah, the total.
Yeah, and maybe some of those financial reports might be available to the public just to show that you're doing what you say you're doing. You know, things like that. But anyway, so when you're thinking about Vince's security needs are going to be pretty modest, right? Point of sale, again, assume that the credit card information is handled by a third party, because otherwise that gets really complicated. And then once we've defined the requirements, then, as I said, we'll present them. And the main reason for this is I really want a discussion which is more than me coming around and talking about it, which is what I've done. I really think it would be a more robust, I hope it is. If you all sit silent and do nothing, it won't be anything. But you can compare notes. That's what this is for, is to compare notes between groups. So that is the assignment, is to do these tasks. I think that there is, there's a few more. Oh, no, that's actually, let's go back to the assignment. That's just the file. Because we will do all those things, but not all in one assignment. So let's go back to the module. Let's look at the first assignment. So this just involves listing all the requirements. You know, these include all the things the database needs to do in order to task, all the columns of data it needs to store, and any security requirements. Business rules, if you want to list the business rules I gave you, fine, but you can, if there's any, mostly I'm interested if you see any additional business rules you think should be in place. We'll present these and then we'll talk about them, and then you can revise. If you have to do, if somebody suggests something, you're not obligated to do it if you don't think that that's something that your database should have. I just want you to discuss it, look at it. As a group, you can, one person is all that needs to do it in a group, right? And Google Docs works really well, just doing a link to it, but you can also upload a file, like a Word file or a Notepad file, whatever you want to do. You can even paste your stuff directly into a text box. Notice it has a text entry box, a website URL, or a file. Google Docs works really well. Also, it's a good way to share. Have you guys all used Google Docs? There's other things you can do. You can do the same thing with, now that you all have Office 365, you can do it from OneDrive too, if you prefer it. Yeah. I don't mind it. They give you a terabyte, so.
It constantly seems to have problems with syncing.
I haven't had to. I had a couple of problems with syncing, but not recently. But Google Drive works fine in Google Docs. Actually, for whatever reason, Google Drive and Docs are really integrated into Canvas. They work really well there. There is a bit of things, so I'm just going to list of requirements, business and security rules, and then the presentation. And mostly for the presentation, is just doing it. I'm not going to fine tune that. All right, for the groups, and we can do this today or tomorrow, but I do want everybody in a group of at least a couple. So I'm going to go to people. Again, I'm not sure how this is set up as a student. So this is the Vince's Vinyl groups. And you notice that there's like, I made like 15 of them or 10 of them. How many did I make? I made 10. So there's a max of 30, and we're a lot less than that today. You can just drag your name. I allowed you to assign yourself to groups. If you don't want to do that, I can assign you. But just whoever you want to work with. And I don't care which group it is. I guess you guys have to decide which group is which. We can do that today, or we can do it on Monday.
Yeah, we have a join button instead.
You have a join button. But do you get to join together?
No, you-
How do you do?
It should be, yeah, when you go to groups tab, there's a join button on the right.
So how do I know?
So what you want to do,
But it don't
you have to pick a group. So you have to kind of agree on a group, I guess, that you are.
Icon club.
There should be enough groups. I'd like groups to be no more than 4 people. Can you unjoin if you get them in the wrong group? Well, if this doesn't work, in the future, I will put you in groups. But I'd rather you work with somebody you want to work with. You can have 4 if you want. Okay. So you can start now.
Too many people are trying to join.
Group one.
Okay,
Let's do group 2.
You do Python as well?
Yeah.
So if you go to the.
So if this is, I said, if this is too chaotic, we'll do it differently in the future. Yeah, you can have up to 4.
Okay, so. And Anita? Okay. You approved everything. I just joined it.
Groups are locked.
Do you have a group already?
I do. You guys got a group, don't you?
So you want Vincent Vinyl groups.
Okay. Now we will-
Don't join the Python or the
Wanna join ours?
other groups. The Vincent Vinyl group.
This is TJ. I'm Rebecca. We've got Vincent Final 10. You wanna join? It's all the way down to the bottom.
Actually, you guys are doing pretty good. There's a lot of.
Okay, so let me go back up here to seven.
I would suspect most of the people showing there aren't here. Actually, some of you are.
Uh-oh. We're all messed up.
You're all messed up.
People are jumping into different groups and.
Oh, well, that's what I was wondering. If this is too chaotic, I
We're
would.
number 7.
I think we need to,
Yeah. It's
like,
final
keep a
number
list
7.
of groups and have people yell out the numbers
We're
they're
gonna
grabbing.
have 4 groups.
Can you leave a group when you're in
Yeah,
it?
you can leave a group. We do.
There's another group that needs a
Okay.
third person.
Is that one?
Is there another group you want to join?
Okay. It looks like 8.
One other thing, can you see? You can't see this view, right?
Not with the students on the side, but we can see who's in our group. Like
It's showing
So I think you can leave a group if you get in the wrong one. I thought it would be easier if you guys could, but it may be harder. I don't know. Well, next time I can do that if enough people want that.
It's say leave if you want to leave.
Oh, sure, okay. You can't log in?
It doesn't have to be logged in. Yeah. It just doesn't ever let you log in. No, we're talking about the.
somebody else.
I can't get in.
So as I said, Monday will be an open lab to work on this, and then we'll do the presentations on Wednesday and maybe move on to the next.
Okay, we're in 6 now.
So you need to move.
Elvira.
Elvira.
So do you need to move to 6 then, or are you in 7?
And then I'm going to share it out.
Maybe hit switch to the 6.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, so as a group, we're just supposed to work on the SQL Server requirement.
Yeah, just the requirement, that's the first thing to work on. Yeah.
I'm showing.
And then we'll actually do that whole module. So your group will be together. I don't know if I said this, so it's for creating the requirements, but it's also, it would be good if the group's held together to also do the diagram and build the database, and then when we go to the MySQL, you're all welcome to shift again.
Okay.
And if you need to shift on Monday or something, I can, that's fine.
You gonna say?
Yeah.
You should find those people.
I did.
They're over there. We're good. Okay.
So just to be a little clear, I'm thinking that the groups will last for one module, right? So we'll go through and we'll do the requirements, we'll create the diagram, and you'll actually build the database. So I'm assuming that the group will last for one module, and then you're welcome to shift to the after the next one. If you decide by Monday that you don't want your group, you can still shift probably on Monday. Chaos, a little chaos is okay. Anybody not have a group or is totally out here? Okay.
Are you on my 101?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry,
Yeah.
you were on the other side.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, he was in my.
Yeah, we're all-
Yeah. Yeah.